move on to our measures of central tendency, and we're going to be dealing with grouped data, that is data that's been placed into class intervals. We've been given the question for the following data set. Calculate the estimated mean, the modal interval or class, as well as stating in which interval the median lies. Okay, so how do we calculate the estimated mean of a data set? You know that the mean is going to be the sum of a certain value in your data set divided by the number of your total data variables in this set. In this instance, to calculate the mean where you have group data, I first need to find the midpoint of our data intervals as well as the cumulative frequency of those intervals. So to find the midpoint of the class interval, that is where our data lies between 0 and 4, I'm simply going to add 0 to 4 and divide it by 2. And we're going to get a value of 2 for our midpoint. Therefore, the midpoint of that class interval is equal to 2. And do the same calculation for the following class intervals. So that is between 4 and 8. I add the 2 and I divide them by 2. I get a value of 6. And for the rest of the intervals, I get values of 10 and 14. Regarding cumulative frequency is just the sum of all the frequencies that came before the class interval that you are handling. So, practically, if we're looking at our first interval, the frequency is 4, our cumulative frequency will be 4. In the second interval, where we have a frequency of 15, our cumulative frequency will be 15 plus 4, which is 19. In our third interval, we have a frequency of 13, so our cumulative frequency is going to be the frequency of that interval plus all of the frequencies that came before. That's 13 plus 19 gives us a value of 32. And in our final class interval, we have a frequency of 7, and so the cumulative frequency is going to be 7 plus 32. That's going to give us a value of 39. Let us find the mean of this data. So the mean, when it comes to grouped data, is going to be the sum of all of your data values multiplied by their frequencies divided by the cumulative frequency or the total number of values in the data set. Practically, the mean in this instance, if we were to calculate it, would be 4 frequency multiplied by the midpoint of the class interval, which is 2, plus 15 a frequency multiplied by 6 a midpoint, plus 13 multiplied by 10, plus 7 multiplied by 14. All of that being divided by 39, the cumulative frequency of this data set. And that is going to give us an answer of 16.5. So that is the mean value of this data set. The modal interval or class is going to be that data value which appears the most frequently. And you'll notice I said frequently because we are going to be looking at the modal class, or the class in which we have the highest frequency. Because where you have the highest frequency, you know that the values between or within that data class are going to appear the most often. So looking at this table, where we have class intervals with the frequencies of 4, 15, 13, and 7, the class interval with the highest frequency, that is 15, is going to be our modal class. So that is going to be the modal class, the class between 4 and 8. Now let's take a look at the median interval. So we remember that our median is the midmost value, and we calculate our median in grouped data by adding our cumulative frequency 39, which is just describing the total number of data variables in our data set, plus 1 multiplied by a half, as we did earlier, and that is going to be 40 divided by 2. So our median interval is going to lie at 20. So that is where we have 20 data values. How are we going to find this median interval? Well, we're going to look at our cumulative frequencies in this final column. We know it cannot lie in the first interval because we only have 4 data values there. The second interval, it also cannot lie in because we only have up to our 19th data value in that set. Therefore, our median interval must be our third interval, that is between 8 and 12, because between 8 and 12 we will find our 21st value, that is between 19 and 32. So the median interval is going to be between 8 and 12. Okay, now that you've seen me attempt one of these examples, I'd like you to try and work on one on your own. Pause and try, and we will see how you've done after you've done it. Now that you've had an opportunity to try this example, let us do it together. So we've been given the following data set, and they've asked us to calculate the estimated mean, the modal interval, as well as stating which interval the median lies. So as before, I am first going to calculate the midpoint of my data sets, and then I'm going to calculate the cumulative frequency of each of these class intervals. The class interval between 25 and 50 will find our midpoint by adding 25 to 50 and dividing it by 2, which will give us a value of 37.5. So 37.5 is our first midpoint, and I'm going to do the same calculation for all the other class intervals, which will give us a value of 62.5 for the second, 87.5 for the third, and 112.5 for the last class interval. To find our cumulative frequencies, I am simply going to be adding the frequency of that class interval to the cumulative frequency of the previous class interval. So in the first interval, our cumulative frequency is 7. In our second, our cumulative frequency is 12 plus 7, and that is going to give us a value of 19. In our third interval, our cumulative frequency is going to be 4 plus 19, which is 23. And in the final interval, our cumulative frequency is going to be 19 plus 23, and that is going to give us a value of 42. Now that we've got our midpoint and our cumulative frequencies, let's start answering these questions. To find the mean, as I did before, we're going to find the sum of the frequency of each data interval multiplied by the midpoint of said interval, and we're going to divide that by the net cumulative frequency, or the cumulative frequency of the last class interval. And so in this example, to do that complete calculation, I'm going to say 7 times 37.5 plus 12 times 62.5 plus 4 times 87.5, etc., all over 42. And that final answer is going to be equal to 83.3. So that is going to be our estimated mean. To find the mode, we remember that the mode is the value that appears the most frequently, so we're going to think highest frequency. So the class interval with the highest frequency out of all of these class intervals is going to be the one with a frequency of 19. That is the interval between 100 and 125. Our median interval, we're going to look at the cumulative frequency of our final class interval. And we're going to add 1 multiplied by a half, as we did before. That's going to give us a value of 21.5. That is the position of our mode, or so it's the 21st, or between the 21st and the 22nd data point. And now we're going to look at our cumulative frequency. And we'll notice that the first 7 data points appear in the first class interval. The first 19 data points will be appearing between the first and the second interval. Therefore, to find our 21st data point, we'll be looking within the third interval, which contains all of the data points between the 19th point and the 23rd point. So, the median interval is going to be between 75 and 100.